You are listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And our guest,
Lou Freeman.
Lou, thanks for coming back. The last time we had you on, you were talking about your, Air Force career, and then where we left off was when you were transitioning into Southwest as a commercial airline pilot. And we wanted to hear more about your career as a commercial airline pilot with Southwest Airlines.
Well, I'll start off by saying I loved every minute I was at Southwest Airlines. I was there for over 36 years. I was the first black pilot that they hired, and it was really interesting initially because we were going to class, but we weren't in uniform, so people didn't recognize me as a pilot. Nobody knew I was a pilot until I put the uniform on, walked down to the airplane, and as I go through security, one of the girls at security says, "Oh my God, they hired a black one." And so I went over to her and introduced myself and found out her name. And after that, I always called her by her name. But it was that odd. I mean,
What year was that?
That was 1980. I got hired November 10th, 1980, and I was actually online by Thanksgiving, so it wasn't a lot of training because we were already qualified in the airplane. So,
did it feel weird to you at all to be the first black pilot for Southwest? Did you feel kind of different in any way or separated?
No.
That's good.
First of all, my high school integrated. We were the first black kids to go to our high school. I was the first black cadet corps commander. I was the first black corps commander at my college.
So you were used to being a trailblazer.
I was used to working hard and succeeding.
Yeah.
And so, to be the first black pilot, first of all, I was surrounded by my whole squadron, and they were the reason that I was there. So I didn't feel like I was a lone stranger.
That's good.
I didn't feel like I was by myself.
So when you say surrounded by your squadron, your Air Force buddies, the people you flew with when you were in the Air Force.
Yes. The people I flew with in the Air Force, they were captains when I came in as a second lieutenant. And they all got out, and a bunch of them came to Southwest. And they sponsored me at Southwest. And so when I flew my first trips, I actually flew with a guy I knew in the Air Force.
Do you start out as I don't know the proper terms, but like the second pilot? Isn't there like a primary pilot and a co-pilot and a second pilot?
Alternative pilot.
The backup pilot? I guess they're called co-pilots. It came to me.
In the airline, they're called first officers.
Okay.
They have a captain in the left seat and a first officer in the right seat.
So did you have to start off as a first officer?
Yes, it's all seniority. You start off as a first officer, and when your seniority says that you've been around long enough, you can upgrade to captain.
So what's the difference in your tasks on the plane between those two positions?
The first officer needs to know how to say, "Yes, sir," or "Yes, ma'am." And the captain is the one that makes all the decisions.
Okay. So as a first officer, you fly the plane when the captain goes to the bathroom.
No, you fly every other leg.
Oh, okay.
You get as much flying as the captain does. But if anything goes on, well, then whatever the captain says is what you end up doing.
Okay.
And if you were having an emergency, if you lost an engine or something like that, the captain would take over and land.
Back in the 1980s, were there two people in the cockpit or three?
Two.
Okay. And were there navigators or other
They were called flight engineers.
Flight engineers.
Yes. And some airlines even had flight engineers in the 737. The 737 was designed strictly for two pilots.
Oh, okay.
And like the 727 and the ones before, they were designed for three pilots, and the third pilot was the flight engineer. Some airlines had a flight engineer in the 737, and basically they just sit on the jump seat and would talk on the radio to company, that kind of stuff, and maybe talk to the people in the back, but you never touched the yoke. You never flew the airplane.
So is a flight engineer somewhat obsolete because planes have like a GPS type system?
Well, they're obsolete because even without the GPS, we didn't have GPS in the 73200. But you only had the two seats that were doing the flying, and all the systems were automated. You had little lights that came on whenever something was wrong, and then you had your annunciator panel right in front of you, and big yellow lights would come on if something was wrong, and you'd look up. It'll have the system on it. You look up and see what system is not working, and then you would do something about it. If it was a fire, it'd be a red light and it'd make a noise. So,
did you have any scares while you were flying?
No, you were trained for pretty much everything. So did I have emergencies? Yes.
What was your most emergent emergency?
I can't say anything was my most emergent emergency because, like I said, we were trained for all that. That's the one thing that they made sure of. In the Air Force, we did a training flight in that airplane once a month. And then I was an instructor, so I was doing those training flights all the time. So I did kind of know where all the switches were and all the systems, So it's like whatever happens, you're ready for it.
Sounds like a very reliable aircraft.
It is a very reliable airplane. It's the 737, until just recently, was one of the most reliable airplanes in the world.
Well, that's good. Makes me feel a little bit. I wasn't afraid of crashing in a plane because I know driving is much more dangerous, but it's nice to know that I probably won't, that the airplane is reliable.
No, the airplane is very reliable. People get nervous and scared when you go through turbulence, but those wings are made to flex just like a bird's wings. They go up and down. I mean, the 737 wings, they used to have, like they could flex like 13 feet.
Oh, wow.
So
the reliability has significantly increased just within my lifetime. I mean, I remember being younger and you would hear about, air disasters. But when's the last time that a commercial airliner went down in the continental United States? I can't even remember how long ago it's been.
I don't know.
It just doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't.
Well, Sully went into the water.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Hudson River.
That was a while ago, too, though.
That was, God.
And nobody died,
ago?
not one person. And that wasn't a failure of the airplane. That was just ingesting a whole bunch of geese.
Yeah.
It was.
It was the failure of the goose flock to move.
What were some of the differences?
Air traffic.
What were some of the differences between flying for the Air Force and flying civilian?
Flying for the Air Force, you had all the time in the world, so you took your time with whatever. And the maintenance, even though our maintenance was good, they weren't fast. Flying for the airline, every minute that airplane wasn't in the air was a minute it wasn't making money. So it was like boom, 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 boom. We used to have what we call 10-minute turns where you would land and pull up at the gate, offload 122 people, unload 122 people, and be off that gate in 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. I heard now typically the turnaround time is 20 minutes or 20 to 30.
It's probably more like 25, I'm guessing, minimum. Yeah. But the airplanes are bigger, too, though.
Right.
122 versus 143 or 175, it makes a difference.
And you have to account for passengers that have broken feet like I do right now.
Oh,
a little bit slower on and off.
We'd bring you in early. But
I know that's the one benefit.
But we would push back with people standing up. The aisle would be still full of people, and we'd be pushing back and taxiing. And if they made a mistake and had too many people on board, we'd call up and say, hey, we're returning to the gate. We have a spinner. And we'd call them spinners because they would be standing in the middle of the aisle going around and around looking for a seat.
That's the one thing about Southwest is no assigned seats.
Yeah,
How often
exactly.
would that happen?
You know, it would happen every so often. It didn't happen every day necessarily because we got better about counting. But people,
One, two.
no, it wasn't that. We had those plastic boarding passes. And like for this flight, you might use green. For the other flight, you were using red. Well, people would steal our boarding passes. And so then, you know, the person that was collecting them wasn't looking to say, okay, I have number 43 already, and then here comes another 43. So people would actually get on the airplane that hadn't paid a dime. They had stolen the boarding pass, and they were reusing it.
And that was before TSA. You know, you could actually go down where the gates were without actually having to have a ticket.
Right, I
That's
remember.
true.
I remember when I was a kid picking up my dad from flights. We'd always just go greet him at the gate, as opposed to like waiting outside. So speaking of that, a lot of those changes occurred because of September 11th. How did September 11th? What happened to you that day, and how did that impact flying commercially?
Oh, it was a total shock to our system as far as flying because we had to do things totally different. Before then, people would hijack airplanes and they would take it to Cuba or something like that.
You make that sound so nonchalant. They just hijack an airplane and take it to Cuba. That
I'm
sounds horrifying.
serious. That's exactly what would happen. They weren't using airplanes as weapons. They were
Right.
using airplanes as transportation. So you would basically taught to disagree with them as much as you can, but not overdo it and
Were you ever flying a hijacked airplane?
never.
Okay, thank God.
No. Yeah, exactly right. Nobody wanted a Southwest airplane. I mean, we didn't have enough gas to get to Cuba. So unless you wanted to go to Lubbock. But the bottom line is they came up with a whole different paradigm. And it's like, whoa. So now it changed. First of all, they hardened the doors so they can't get in the door. And second of all, you don't come out of that cockpit. I don't care what's going on in the back. The flight attendants have to handle it. You do not come out of that cockpit. And the next of all, I mean, we're more prepared. You're more thinking about that. We have TSA now that we didn't have. We had security, but security, you could come through security with a lot of different stuff.
Like shoes.
And water bottles.
Yeah.
Actually, that was before water bottles.
I once took a pizza on an airplane.
Oh, yeah. That might be still
Chicago
allowed.
stuffed pizza in the overhead.
That's still legal. You could do Giordano's and stuffed pizzas and stuff. But the bottom line is it changed the way we saw flying, and it changed the way everybody saw flying.
Yeah. It was impactful for sure. Even as a passenger, just the changes in progressively more and more security to get through, and now the real IDs to fly and all of that. It's definitely on both ends.
Was it more fun when you first started at Southwest than when you retired? Or was it the same throughout the entire career?
It was fun in different ways because by the time I retired, we were going down to the Caribbean and to Mexico and places like that versus Lubbock and Midland and Austin. When I first got hired by Southwest, the only places we went to outside of Texas were Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and New Orleans.
What's your favorite destination when you were flying?
Midway.
So
I get a chance to come home.
as a retired Southwest pilot, do you have like pilot emeritus where you can continue to fly for free with Southwest?
You can fly for free, but because Southwest is always so full, I never fly for free. I always buy tickets.
Oh, okay. So otherwise you're going to have to fly standby?
You just watch people when you go on standby. You get a chance to see all your friends go by. You sit in the airport all day long. But yeah.
Oh, you don't like that?
I would love it. My wife gets a little testy.
For people who want to become a pilot, what would you say to them?
I would say if you really want to do it, do it. But be aware that you're going to have to work hard to get it done. You can't just say, I think I want to be a pilot today. And there's a lot of work to being a professional pilot.
So what's if somebody is, let's say there's a 16-year-old high school student out there and they're trying to think about it, maybe you could summarize what they would have to, the path from high school to commercial airline pilot.
Well, there's not just one path. It used to be mainly one path, which would be graduate from high school, go to a university. Whether it was a university with a flying program or not, you needed a 4-year degree. If you had flying at the university, you obviously took flying and you graduated. And most people became a CFI, which is a certified flight instructor, so you could build your time and somebody would be paying for it. Or after you went to the university, you went off to the military and let the military send you to pilot training. And then you owed them your commitment after pilot training. But those were the ways then. Now you can go straight from high school, get into pathway programs that the airlines have. And by the time you would have been graduating from college, you could be pretty much in the right seat of an airliner.
Well then
is
and that's
right.
the first officer seat, right?
That's right. That's the first officer seat. So they're different paths. It's not just one well-worn way, but probably the best-known way is to go to school, get your CFI, and work as a CFI until you're able to build your time and go with the regionals. And after you have the regionals for a while, then you graduate and go to the majors.
So what would you say is the benefit of getting the 4-year degree as opposed to going into one of those pathway programs?
You have a plan B. If you get a 4-year degree, you have something that's sellable.
Right.
If you go straight from high school and don't bother to get the degree, if something happens and you have a medical or you can't fly or the airline furloughs, you're on the streets.
Yeah, that's a good point. And with that, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. You've been listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White
and
Lou Freeman.
Thank you.